So, back at it again to do my review for the most recent episode for My Hero Academia Season 7. And let's just say that this episode has some great animation and adapts the material extremely well to the point of me being in shock and awe. And you'll get to see that right now. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Man Drew, and I'm here to do the review and breakdown for My Hero Academia Season 7, Episode 7. 7-7, this is the episode, and I cannot wait to discuss it with you. There's a lot that we really need to go over in this episode in relationship to how well it was animated, how well it was adapted, and some very interesting changes that may throw the entire fandom into a whirlwind. So let's dive right into this breakdown and really talk about this review. So, when it comes to this episode, the title of the episode is titled Infiltration and derives its name from chapter 347. And the episode itself covers 3 chapters, once again, chapters 347, 348, and 349. And what's interesting about this episode right before the opening begins is that it's kind of a pseudo recap of some initial scenes that we saw in episode 4 when it comes to All Might Hawks, the pilots from UA, as well as Ragdoll coming up with a plan to separate All for One, Tomura Shigaraki, and Dabi. But what is very interesting about this is that it actually expands upon the plan in more details based off what the plan has already been done and enacted, where we get to see some initial locations where other characters are being sent and the heroes that are going to be fighting against them. For example, they discussed that Tomura Shigaraki is supposed to be fighting against Deku, Bakugo, and the rest that we saw in the Flying Coffin, but we also get some more expansion on some locations that we actually do not get confirmation of until most likely the next few episodes after this. So we're kind of hinting at some other locations that may or may not be important to this war before they actually appeared in the manga itself. So that's something that I really like about the anime, adding and expanding on these scenes to kind of hint at what's to come within the next episodes or within the season itself. And speaking of recaps, once we reach past the opening of this episode, we cut back over to how we left off the last episode with Tomura launching Mirko away as we have Aizawa commenting on how this is going to be an issue and how they discuss how Deku can't get back to the location at this moment via warp gate because by doing so would cause a whole bunch of damage and death now that Tomura Shigaraki's hands are being freed from his body, and that if decay can be spread from even just all of these hands, then everyone is doomed. And let's just say that when it comes to this scene, we need to bring up the very much big elephant in the room, that the hands aren't fully animated by hand, that they are very much CGI, but I would say that the CGI in this episode, when it comes to the hands, were actually fairly done well. It isn't significantly jarring to the extent of taking you out of the actual moment that is being displayed, and if anything, it adds to just the difference that these hands are, as they are seemingly compared to not be like Quirk's, which is why Erasure isn't working on him right now. But yes, as we do have this scene occurring, as we have what we're assuming is Tomura giving a monologue for how this is happening, you have the heroes confronting each other and realizing that while Deku isn't here, that they still believe that they can put on a fight and fight against Tomura without him. As we get a sort of superhero money shot right before we cut over to a new location that we actually saw a few episodes prior. Because cutting from there, we actually get the more proper introduction of Okuto Island, which is kind of described as being 200 meters away from Japan, as well as the primary location for Gang Orca, where we do have a few added and expanded scenes of the heroes and the villains going up against the Nomu, as we see how the Nomu is able to fight in this very unique way, which is not fully conveyed in the manga, but is clearly conveyed in the anime. As we see the heroes are coming in conflict with the villains, even some old villains such as Moonfish, which are doing heavy damage against Gang Orca. But what is also very interesting about the scene is that this is one of the very few scenes, and not the last scene, from the manga and the anime where we are introduced two anime original characters that were in the manga. As we see the little fish girl hanging next to Tsuyu, which is an original character seen in the extra episodes. So it's cool that we're kind of going full circle with this, with an anime original character appearing in the manga, and now their manga appearance is now appearing back in the anime in canon material from a non-canon source. But yeah, as this is all happening, you have Deku, who's a little bit more conflicted on the location that he's in right now, not knowing what to do, as we see that Toga is able to sneak upon him and do a sneak attack while Deku's Danger Sense does not go off. And it's here that is revealed that Danger Sense cannot read the movements of Toga because the malice intent that is normally associated with Danger Sense cannot detect the malice in Toga, because what is viewed as being malicious by Deku is not viewed as malicious by Toga. And this kind of makes sense because we can tell that certain quirks very much are dependent on how other characters either perceive themselves or how they are perceived by the quirk. And so the fact that Toga equates dealing damage and dealing harm as being a form of love, Danger Sense cannot react in this moment. And from here, this is where we get probably the most anticipated scenes of the entire anime and within the manga, where Toga wants to confess her love to Deku and pretty much does, and says that she wants to be Deku's boyfriend and would he allow her to suck his blood. Where we get a funny interaction of Deku trying to comprehend this entire situation and trying to understand why she wants him to be her boyfriend, as we have the narrator chiming in, and this is where a major difference between the anime and the manga may occur. Because in the manga, it's implied that the person who is narrating this moment may actually be Bakugo. But in the anime, we see that the actual character presenting this is Present Mike. And this is very interesting because it really doesn't change the dynamic of this scene at all from the anime to the manga, but it's just very interesting to see that this is most likely the confirmation that this isn't Bakugo speaking, but it is Present Mike. And what he's saying is not completely out of character for Present Mike to say because he's very much unhinged. But yes, as the anime seems to have made this change from the anime to the manga, we probably get the best scene of this entire episode, which is the scene of Toga asking Deku the question of what he wants to do with her, as we see the scene transition in the manga being adapted flawlessly in the anime of her fading away in the waves, and that even though these are not fully animated panels and that they are mixed with animations of Toga running and some animations are a little bit more stilted, it adds to the idea and the unease of what's happening with Deku in this moment, and that he's unable to read her moments, and that she's able to move through these things so quickly and just so smoothly that everything seems to be going in slow motion, and that he cannot keep up as everything is just happening around him, as maybe time is somewhat slowing down for him, as we see that perception displayed in the anime itself. But even then, we do get cool scenes of Deku trying to find and locate Toga as we give his answer, and as he understands what Toga is feeling, that he cannot understand how she views harming someone as being the same as love, where we just get so many fantastic images and facial features and faces of Toga in this chapter, with the one where her eyes begin to narrow is the most impactful, because she believes she has an answer from Deku, and it's one that she doesn't like, which causes her to go on the offensive and attack Deku. And it's in this moment where we actually potentially get Danger Sense reacting to this moment as it was in the manga, but it's done in a very quick and brief pacing, as we see Deku being able to block and throw off the mechanical devices around her. And something else that I'm going to bring up is that a slight difference between what is happening in the anime and what was happening in the manga is that later on we see that Deku was able to do damage to the flying drones around Toga, but later on in the next few scenes we see that not really a lot of damage was done to them. So potentially either he was holding back relative to the anime, or that these little things are a lot stronger than they are in the manga. But going off from there, we do have Uraraka trying to come in and save Deku, as we see that even though she cannot read the movements of Toga like Deku because she lacks Danger Sense, Toga comes in and stabs her heavily in the shoulder. But luckily enough, you have Deku as well as Tsuyu coming in to save Uraraka. And there's something very interesting about this moment, because it's very important for what's potentially to come towards the end of this war. And I won't give spoilers, But the fact that in this moment, Deku is trying to question whether or not he should stay here, but Uraraka and Tsuyu tell him to leave, and that she needs to be able to take care of this, and that they need to trust her. And that she gives a line of quote unquote, "let's do our best," which is a reference to the fact that Deku's name, comparable to Uraraka, sounds like "do your best" in the Japanese language. And this is going to most likely be a running idea or theme. Not only have we seen prior, especially during the Vigilante Deku arc, where you have All Might and all the characters telling Deku to do his best, but potentially this is going to be running more into what we're going to be seeing later on, if not in this season, within the end of this war. Just keep that in mind. But with that in mind, Deku's able to leave the island and leave Uraraka in the care of going off and defeating Toga. And I will say that we do get to see how he's able to take off clearer in the anime than we do in the manga, as we see that he uses Fajin as well as float to allow him to pretty much fly far distances towards the mainland of Japan, while he uses his finger gloves and air force to propel him and change his direction in midair to help him keep his balance. As we also get hinted potentially at a quirk that Deku could have from the second user of One for All, and how he needs to be cautious because by doing so could have major repercussions, and it may cause damage to his body as well as his weaponry, which he needs to keep in pristine condition as he goes after Tomoe Shigaraki. And as he leaves, we have Uraraka and Tsuyu going up against Toga, and Tsuyu brings up that she didn't want Uraraka's secret about who she loves to be brought up in front of everyone else, as we see that both Uraraka as well as Toga make a declaration of what they want to do. Toga doesn't need heroes and wants to say goodbye to them all, while Uraraka wants to fight against Toga the way that she believes is best for her, as they both say their names, cutting over to what is going to be the final part of this episode, and an amazing transition where we transition over to Kamino, as we see that we're getting the confrontation between Dabi and Shoto. And there are some added scenes where we do get to see more heroes that are assumedly dead on the ground, fighting either against the Nomu or being heavily damaged by Dabi's blue flames, which we see are very much animated extremely well and are so hot that even Ida cannot get close to it because his engines are stalled. And as we have this, we have just the scene of Dabi just floating in the air, being animated so well, as he gives his monologue about how he was unable to fight against Endeavor and that this is his answer that Endeavor has given him. But what is very interesting about the scene in both the anime and the manga is the introduction of two new characters, Onima as well as Kido, and it seems as if Onima wasn't introduced in this episode, so I'm going to introduce him now. He's the character with the horns on his head, while Kido is the guy with the bandages around his body. And we get hints on the relationships to Endeavor, as well as Burning's relationship to Endeavor, and how it all boils down to the fact that no matter what Endeavor did in his personal life, they know that he was a true blue hero to the very end, and that it is that heroics that allows them to follow him, and how they're here to support Shoto, who also confirms that he's here not because of Endeavor, but because he wants to be here. So it really just shows that these characters are going against Dabi in a way that goes against what Dabi perceives to be correct, Endeavor's answer, and how these are not Endeavor's answers, but the answers that they came to on their own. And once again, we have Toya Dabi once again monologuing about how this is a war not against soldiers, but people versus people, as we have him explain the ideas of the villains, wanting to be free and do what they want with Toga, wanting to change the world with Spinner, wanting to destroy like Tomoe Shigaraki, as we get the potential hints to what his motivation is and how he was able to stay alive and why he didn't just go home even though he knew that he was alive the entire time. As we see the famous panel of chapter 349 animated in this episode extremely well, we get a potential setup for a flashback to confirm how Dabi was able to survive the burning many years ago. Then we have the preview, which if we just look at what they're willing to put in the preview for the next episode, that animation is going to go off, especially with the conflict between Toya Dabi and Shoto Todoroki. But yeah, that is my breakdown for this episode of My Hero Academia Season 7. And let me ask you this. What did you think of the episode? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? And did you think that the animation for the Toga bits were on point? Leave your thoughts down below, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!